The sharp scent of disinfectant filled the sterile hospital room. Ethan Carter, my foster brother, stood before me with his close friend, Ryan Lewis. My head throbbed, feeling as if it might split apart at any moment. Everything around me seemed unreal, like a fragmented dream slipping from my grasp. Where was I? Who was I? Ethan immediately assumed I had lost my memory. His expression held a trace of amusement as he gestured toward Ryan beside him. "You're my sister, Sophie Carter, and this is your boyfriend, Ryan Lewis." His words sent a jolt through me, and my gaze instinctively snapped toward Ryan. His cold, sharp features were shadowed with quiet sorrow. He avoided my eyes, yet I could feel his restrained gaze lingering on me. It was just like before. In my past life, after the accident, I had clung to Ethan obsessively. He used my supposed memory loss as an excuse to push me away, fabricating a relationship between me and Ryan. In truth, I had only experienced brief amnesia, recovering quickly. But when I saw through Ethan's deception, I reacted on impulse. Gripping his sleeve, my eyes welled with tears. "I remember everything. I'm not lying." Ethan's expression tightened, but he had no choice but to accept my words. As always, whenever I broke down in tears, he would pull me into his arms with a sigh. "I'm sorry, Sophie. I made a mistake." At 16, I had already realized my feelings for him weren't normal. Each time he pursued a relationship, I would find ways to sabotage it. The books called it possessiveness. I neither denied nor confirmed it. And Ethan, time and time again, silently indulged me. Whenever I caused trouble for his girlfriends, he would intervene discreetly, ensuring they left. He never reprimanded me. That night, intoxicated and emboldened, I clung to him, pressing against him. He didn't push me away. His body stiffened, but he let me continue, indulging my arrogance. I mistook his tolerance for reciprocation. I kissed him, believing he felt the same. But then suddenly, he shoved me away in disgust, wiping his lips with the back of his hand. His voice was laced with revulsion. "Sophie, how could you love your own brother? That's disgusting." A chill washed over me. My whole body froze. "No, I don't. I don't love you," I whispered, but even as I said it, the words felt hollow. He saw through me. "You don't love me, huh?" I had no answer. Deep down, I knew the truth. I did love him. As an orphan, Ethan had been my only source of warmth, my only refuge. How could I not love him? His expression darkened. "A freak like you belongs in a mental institution." My thoughts snapped back to the present. Ethan stood before me, smirking in quiet amusement. A shiver ran down my spine, and I clenched my fists so tightly that my nails dug into my palms. The sharp sting kept me grounded. Looking straight into his eyes, I made a silent vow. I would never let myself be entangled with him again. Everything ended the moment I died in my past life. The psychiatric hospital had been a nightmare. Ethan visited me every 2 weeks, only to witness my suffering. I endured the beatings, the humiliation. I wept, pleading with him. "Please, Ethan, let me go. I was wrong. I won't love you anymore." But each time, he would merely look down at me with cold indifference. "Sophie, you're losing your mind again." The torment continued, day after day, until, after 6 unbearable months, I died. Only then did Ethan crumble. He clung to my lifeless body, racked with sobs, confessing his regrets. He admitted he had always loved me but had been too afraid of how the world would judge him. As a spirit, I watched it all with a detached indifference. It was too late. Even now, standing before him again, a nauseating wave of disgust churned within me. So, I turned away. Instead, I faced Ryan Lewis. Holding back my tears, I reached out toward him and softly whispered, "Husband, hold me." A deafening crash echoed through the room as porcelain shattered against the floor. Ethan's hand bled from where the broken medicine bottle had cut him, dark liquid pooling at his feet. He stood frozen, his usual smug amusement erased, replaced by raw fury. But I no longer cared. Ryan stiffened at my words, his eyes flashing with disbelief, excitement, and something deeper, an overwhelming intensity. His lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but instead, he took a swift step forward and pulled me tightly into his embrace. His voice was hoarse but firm. Ethan clenched his injured hand, blood dripping steadily to the floor. He coughed lightly and raised it toward me, as if expecting concern. But the sight of his blood only filled me with revulsion. I wrinkled my nose in disgust. Ryan pulled me closer, shielding me with his coat. "Don't look," he murmured. "It's disgusting." Stepping in front of me. His expression was cold as he glared at Ethan. "You know he's afraid of blood, yet you do this on purpose. Are you trying to make him sick?" A strange emotion stirred in my chest. I brushed Ryan's hand aside, gazing up at him. His face was as sharp and pale as I remembered, but now, somehow, he seemed even more striking than before. In my previous life, Ryan had always been quiet and reserved. Seeing him openly challenge Ethan like this was something I had never witnessed before. Ethan was just as taken aback. "What does this have to do with you?" he scoffed, rolling his eyes. But his injured hand trembled slightly as he stretched it out again, as if anticipating my reaction. "Sophie, I'm hurt." In the past, I would have panicked, scrambling for medicine, tears welling up as I tried to bandage his wound. But now, I instinctively shrank further into Ryan's arms, my gaze filled with disgust as I looked at Ethan's dirty, bloodied hand. "There are doctors outside, Ethan." "I'm not one of them." Impatiently, I cut him off before he could say more. "I'm tired. I just want to go home." From the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Ryan's lips curling into a small smile, like a pleased puppy. Physically, I was fine. The doctor had said I only needed rest. But Ryan refused to let me walk on my own, insisting on carrying me out of the hospital. That was the moment Ethan snapped. His expression darkened, and he grabbed my arm with a crushing grip. "Sophie, didn't you say you wanted to go home?" I pried his fingers off me one by one, watching red marks form on my skin. "Yes, I'm going home, with my boyfriend." "Is that a problem?" Ethan let out a bitter laugh, his voice shaking with rage. "Sophie Carter, you better not regret this." I met his gaze head-on, my voice steady. "The only thing I regret is not seeing the truth sooner. In my past life, I had been blind, manipulated by Ethan at every turn. Not this time." Ryan carried me to the car, carefully buckled my seatbelt, and started the engine. As we sped away, leaving Ethan behind, Ryan's warm, steady hand never let go of mine. By the time we arrived home, exhaustion weighed heavily on me. My body ached, and all I wanted was a hot shower. As if sensing my thoughts, Ryan immediately ran a bath. He even opened a brand new bottle of essential oil. The sweet scent of jasmine filled the air. My favorite. Then he walked to the closet, pulling out a fresh set of loungewear. The tags were still attached, the size a perfect fit. I frowned slightly. "Why do you have this?" Ryan scratched the back of his head, his face turning red. "I saw it while shopping and thought it would suit you, so I bought it." I raised an eyebrow, glancing at the wardrobe behind him, half of which was filled with new clothes, all in my style. "You bought all of this? Just in case?" Ryan let out a long sigh, his expression shifting as if he had given up hiding something. "What's wrong with buying clothes for my girlfriend?" Was this really the same Ryan I remembered? The shy, overly sensitive guy who used to blush just from talking to me? In my past life, Ryan and I had barely interacted, until the moment I died in that psychiatric hospital. It was only after death that I realized the depth of his love for me. As a ghost, I remained trapped in the apartment where I had once lived. When news of my death spread, Ryan went to Ethan, demanding an explanation, but Ethan simply stated that I had died from an incurable illness. He didn't even allow Ryan to investigate the truth. That night, Ryan broke into my apartment, hacking the electronic lock effortlessly. I watched in shock as he stumbled into my bedroom. Following him, I saw his tall frame curled up on my bed, his broad shoulders trembling, his face buried in my pillow. The fabric darkened with his tears. I wanted to comfort him, but I didn't know how. In the end, I simply sat beside him, watching in silence. At some point, I reached out and brushed my fingers through his hair. But I was just a ghost. My hand passed right through him. I tried again, stroking the back of his head gently. "Ryan, stop crying. If you keep this up, I'll have no choice but to kick you." His delicate face stiffened. Then suddenly, his eyes flew open, large tears rolling down his cheeks. But in the next moment, he shut them again, as if surrendering to his grief. "Liar," he whispered. The room fell into eerie silence, broken only by his muffled sobs. From that day on, Ryan moved into my apartment. He lived there, keeping my ghost company. People mocked him, called him crazy. Even I thought he was foolish. He talked to himself constantly, sometimes sharing happy moments as if I were still there, sometimes pouring out his darkest thoughts. I sat beside him, silently listening, watching his once cold expressions soften with sorrow. Day by day, he wasted away. The dining table was always cluttered with medication. I begged him to take care of himself, to live, but he couldn't hear me. We spent 3 years together. 2 lonely souls, separated by an unbridgeable gap. I couldn't touch him. He couldn't hear me. As time passed, my spirit grew more transparent. I knew I would soon vanish entirely. Ryan still left every morning and returned late at night, but I had no idea where he went. I couldn't leave the apartment, so I remained unaware of the outside world. Then, on the 3rd anniversary of my death, he did something strange. Before leaving, he turned on the television and tuned it to the news channel. Just before stepping out, he looked in my direction, his gaze lingering for a long time. A strange unease filled me. Then, the emergency news broadcast began. Ethan Carter, CEO of Yates Corporation, has been killed in a suspected hit-and-run incident. Authorities believe this may have been an act of revenge. The suspect is currently on the run, and police are investigating. The suspect was Ryan. He was a fool. Panic surged through me. My spirit trembled violently, gathering overwhelming energy. I pushed my way out of the apartment, breaking free from the unseen force that had held me captive. An irresistible pull guided me toward a familiar presence, leading me through the night until I arrived at my own grave. Ryan was there, gripping my tombstone as if it were his last anchor to reality, his body racked with silent sobs. "Sophie, I finally avenged you." Empty pill bottles and crushed beer cans littered the ground beside him. A wave of panic surged through me as I circled around him, desperate and helpless. The cemetery was silent, abandoned. No one was there to witness this moment. "Ryan Lewis, I forbid you to die. Do you hear me?" My anguished cry seemed to stir something in him. His bleary eyes met mine for the briefest moment, and then, a faint resigned smile curved his lips. "You've come for me, haven't you?" As the words left his lips, he lifted his wrist, already marked with old scars, and dragged a blade across his skin. "Sophie Carter, if there is another life, I swear. A second chance." I had been given a second chance. And now, looking at his face, so close, so real, I refused to waste it. My chest tightened painfully, memories of his final moments in my past life hitting me like a blade to the heart. A warm hand cupped my cheek, wiping away the tears before they could fall. "Does it still hurt?" The accident had been minor. Superficial wounds, nothing compared to the suffering I had once endured. I shook my head, unwilling to reveal the truth of my rebirth. Instead, I leaned into him, seeking his warmth. "It hurts. It hurts so much. Only kisses can make it better." Ryan's lips parted slightly, his dark eyes gleaming. "Just kisses? Is that enough?" Before I could respond, his hand tightened at the back of my head, and his lips crashed onto mine, overwhelming, consuming. My breath hitched, my thoughts dissolved. Then my phone rang. "Ethan Carter." I ignored it, but the ringing persisted. Annoyed, I reached to silence it, only for my fingers to accidentally answer the call. "Sophie." His voice was calm, measured. "You should move back home. The housekeeper can take care of you." I barely had time to react before Ryan's grip tightened, cutting the call off. 30 minutes later, I was still entangled in his embrace when a sharp knock echoed through the apartment. "Ryan Lewis." The voice was furious, burning with rage. "Who gave you permission to touch him?" "Ethan." Persistent as ever. I sighed, reluctant to move, but it was clear he wasn't leaving. Ryan ruffled my hair, his gaze full of amusement. "Go on." Annoyed, I pushed him toward the door. His lips were still swollen from our kiss as he casually swung it open. Ethan stormed inside, his dark gaze sweeping over me, locking onto the faint red marks on my neck. "You touched him," he growled. "You actually..." Before he could finish, his fist swung toward Ryan. Ryan moved effortlessly, dodging with a calm precision that sent a chill down my spine. Was this really the same Ryan Lewis I had known? Since when had he become this skilled? With swift, calculated movements, he overpowered Ethan and shoved him back toward the door. Get lost. Don't bother him again. The door slammed shut. Ryan turned back to me, his expression instantly softening. Did I scare you? I stared at him, suspicion creeping in. Ryan, are you hiding something from me? He scratched his head, looking almost sheepish. Then he nodded. I crossed my arms. What exactly have you been training for? He smirked and gestured toward his sculpted abs. You like abs, don't you? I blinked, heat creeping up my neck. When did I ever say that? Then it hit me. In my past life, I had spent hours admiring his physique from afar, even commenting on fitness videos online with a burner account. Ryan leaned closer, his smirk deepening. I know about your secret account. The one where you used to obsess over muscles. I swallowed hard. He had done his research. Fine. No point in denying it. My gaze flickered back to his torso. Can I touch them? His face darkened slightly before he muttered a barely audible The next morning, I woke up sprawled across his chest, my fingers still tracing faint red marks on his skin. Ryan Lewis was a silent sleeper, barely moving through the night. I had spent 3 years by his side as a spirit, but this was the first time I was here in the flesh. As reality sank in, embarrassment hit me like a wave. I tried to slip away, only for a firm grip to catch my ankle and pull me back. Ryan's lips brushed against mine as he murmured, a teasing smirk on his lips. Getting shy now? Last night, when you called me master, you didn't look like this at all. My entire body burned. With shaky hands, I shoved him away. I'm hungry. Ryan chuckled, his fingers tracing lazy patterns against my skin, his dark eyes still filled with mischief.
Quickly clarified. I mean, my stomach is hungry. As if on cue. My stomach let out a small growl. Ryan sighed in disappointment but finally withdrew his hand, leaning back with an amused expression. That's strange. Another part of you was saying it was hungry too. By the time we got out of bed and left the room, the housekeeper had already prepared lunch and quietly left. The table was filled with dishes I loved. After the meal, Ryan asked, Do you have any plans for today? I deliberately played along, feigning confusion. I lost my memory. I can't remember anything. Why don't you tell me how we used to date? His face flushed red, but there was a proud glint in his eyes. He swayed his head slightly, looking smug. You used to love being with me. You never wanted to be apart. And where did we like to go on dates? For a brief moment, I wasn't sure if I was imagining things, but his expression darkened. A trace of sorrow flashed in his eyes. He hesitated, lost in deep thought, as if recalling something from a long time ago. We liked to stay at home. Stay at home. Thinking back to this morning, my waist was still sore. There was no way I could spend another day cooped up indoors. Ryan, let's go to the home decor store. He hummed in response. Ryan had never liked lively places, and his home reflected that. It was minimalist and cold. Gray furniture, clean lines, devoid of any warmth or personal touches. But I wanted to leave my mark here. Not just in the wardrobe with a few pieces of clothing, but everywhere. Because Ryan was always so anxious about losing me. Even if I disappeared for just a few seconds, he would immediately rush over to check. Only when he saw that I was still there, safe and sound, would he let out a relieved sigh and pull me tightly into his arms. Sophie, I thought I lost you again. His voice trembled slightly, his breaths coming fast and uneven. When I can't see you, it feels like something is missing. So, he had tried to fill that emptiness by surrounding himself with reminders of me. In just one day, the house transformed completely. I placed plush toys on the bed and the sofa. Ryan scoffed, calling it childish. But I caught him secretly playing with one, squeezing it in his hands until it was deformed. The cold gray bedsheets were replaced with warm pastel pink. The slippers were swapped for adorable bunny-shaped ones. I even picked out matching couple pajamas, one for him and one for me. The living room now held fresh-cut flowers, vibrant orange roses, blooming passionately, radiating warmth like winter sunshine. In the bathroom, I placed a pair of ceramic dolls on the marble counter. One boy, one girl, their faces pressed together, Ryan insisted that the girl looked like me. Round face. Very cute. I argued that the boy looked like him. Dumb but adorable. Makes you want to kiss him. Neither of us backed down. In the end, we decided to place the dolls beside the mirror and agreed that we would stare at them every day until one of us admitted defeat. After taking a shower, we curled up on the couch together. Watching a movie, Ryan draped a soft, fuzzy blanket over us, wrapping me securely in his warmth. The movie was a heartwarming romance. A story of two childhood sweethearts who secretly loved each other for years before finally getting together. In the final scene, the couple adopted a small puppy and lived happily ever after. It was such a simple and peaceful ending. A lump formed in my throat. My nose tingled as an unsettling thought crossed my mind. What would happen if I ever left Ryan Lewis again? He was the most stubborn person I knew. If I disappeared, he would definitely spiral just like in our past life. No, I absolutely couldn't let him do anything foolish again. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. Then, with the utmost seriousness, I cupped Ryan's face and looked straight into his deep eyes. Ryan, let's get a cat. Or maybe a dog. His brows furrowed slightly, a flicker of vigilance flashing across his face. He caught my wrist and held it firmly in his palm. Why? You've never liked animals before. I hesitated for a moment before answering. It's not that I don't like animals. I just wasn't allowed to. In my past life, Ethan Carter's family disapproved of pets. Since I lived under their roof, I had no choice but to follow their rules. I had begged Ethan for a long time before he finally caved and secretly brought home a kitten for me. But before I even got to hold it, my adoptive mother found out. She threw the kitten away and scolded Ethan, accusing him of being irresponsible and unworthy of inheriting the family business. She was so furious, claiming I was a bad influence on him, that she locked me in a dark storage room as punishment. She warned me that if I ever corrupted Ethan again, she would send me back to the orphanage. I never understood how something as simple as a kitten could cause such an uproar, but I was too afraid to resist. I didn't want to go back to the orphanage. So, to appease my adoptive mother, I knelt on the ground, tearfully admitting my mistake, swearing that I would never bring another animal into the house again. Only then did her cold expression soften. She locked me away for a full week. By the time I was let out, the kitten had long since disappeared. It had become a stray, lost somewhere in the city. I had searched for it but never found it. Heartbroken, I wandered aimlessly around the park. That was when I saw Ryan for the first time, crouched down, cradling a large bowl of cat food, quietly feeding a group of stray kittens. The moonlight cast a soft glow over him, making his usually cold features seem almost gentle. I had never seen this side of Ryan before. Ryan's life wasn't much better than mine. No, in some ways, he had it even worse. He was an illegitimate child, unwanted and unacknowledged. His father had been drunk the night he was conceived, and his mother had schemed to get pregnant, hoping to secure a place in the family. But her plan backfired. Ryan became the biggest disgrace to the Lewis family, an embarrassment no one wanted to acknowledge. They treated him as if he were invisible, a stain on their prestigious name. He grew up shrouded in insecurity and darkness. The only warmth he received came from the stray animals in the park, tiny creatures that would rub against his pant legs, trusting him in a way that humans never did. I wanted to get a pet, because if, one day, I left again, Ryan's sense of responsibility would prevent him from abandoning it. Of course, I couldn't let him know that was my reason. I leaned in and kissed his lips softly. Having a little one around would make the house feel livelier. The word little one made Ryan's entire body tense. His lips parted slightly, but no words came out. He seemed to be struggling with something, his emotions too tangled to express. Well, what do you think? I still had unfinished business with Ethan Carter. I couldn't let him off the hook for what he did in my past life. But Ethan was powerful. If something happened to me, I needed to make sure Ryan wouldn't do anything reckless. His dark eyes held my reflection for a long time. The silence stretched between us, so quiet that all I could hear was our steady breathing. I suddenly felt nervous, hooking my arms around his neck. I urged, "Say something. Ryan, what do you think?" After another beat of silence, he finally responded, Okay. That night, I had a nightmare. In my dream, I saw Ryan collapsed in front of my grave, his white sleeves stained crimson with blood. I woke up gasping, my heart pounding wildly in my chest. I reached out instinctively, only to find the bed empty. Ryan was gone. A wave of panic crashed over me. I didn't even bother putting on shoes. I jumped out of bed and ran barefoot through the house, searching for him. Strange noises came from the rooftop. My heart clenched. I ran upstairs, pushing the terrace doors open with force. Ryan. He turned his head at my call. He was wearing an apron, gloves on his hands. The ground was covered with thick gardening mats, and in front of him was a row of blooming flowers in vibrant colors. Each and every one of them was a flower I loved, flowers I had once planted in my old apartment. After I was locked away in the psychiatric hospital, no one took care of my flowers. Ryan Lewis tried everything, but he couldn't save them. And now, here he was, planting flowers again. Why isn't he wearing shoes? Ryan took off his gloves, got up, and went to fetch a towel for my feet. Then, he brought over a small stool and patted the spot beside him, signaling for me to sit down. What made you think of planting flowers? His pale, slender fingers scooped up a handful of soil, pressing it gently into a pot before watering it. Droplets clung to the pink rose petals, shimmering like crystal beads. Once the whole terrace is in full bloom, I can take lots of beautiful pictures of you. The thought painted a lovely scene in my mind. Ryan will definitely have that day. We adopted a little orange kitten and a yellow and white puppy. Ryan had always been the more patient one, making him much better at taking care of them. He also naturally took over most of the household chores. These days, he was constantly busy, yet his face always carried a bright, relaxed smile. Every morning, he would water the flowers, then feed and clean up after the two little troublemakers. After breakfast, he would insist on taking me along to walk them. At night, after our baths, we would curl up on the couch to watch our favorite shows. The kitten and puppy would snuggle at our feet, occasionally letting out contented little sighs. Felt so blissful. The person I loved was right beside me. If I turned my head, I could kiss his soft lips. Just thinking about it made my heart race. I couldn't stop myself from smiling, the corners of my mouth curling up uncontrollably. I want to kiss him. Wait, why does Ryan look like he's enjoying something? Did he figure out what I was thinking? Damn it, I had hidden it so well. Before I could react, his face suddenly appeared right in front of me. Then, he kissed me, out of nowhere. His deep voice murmured against my lips. Sophie Carter, I love you. I had thought we would have more time together. I never expected our separation to come so soon. That day, after leaving the supermarket, I suddenly craved milk tea. I told Ryan to go ahead to the parking garage and bring the car around while I went to buy some. He had barely walked away when a sleek black Porsche Panamera pulled up beside me. I recognized it immediately. Ethan Carter's car. I turned and bolted, but two men in black suits stepped out, grabbing me before I could escape. I was shoved into the car. The driver slammed on the gas. The tires screeched as the car sped off. A partition slowly rose, sealing off the back seat from the front. Ethan Carter, are you insane? Let me go. His tall figure loomed over me, radiating an oppressive force. I scrambled backward, pressing myself against the car door, but he reached out and pulled me into his arms. His ice-cold fingers traced along my waist over the fabric of my clothes. He's lost his mind. What was he trying to do? Was he planning to lock me up in a psychiatric hospital again? No, absolutely not. The terror of my past imprisonment crept over me like a suffocating shadow. Panic surged through my veins. My entire body trembled uncontrollably. Curling up in the corner, I hid my hand behind my back and discreetly unlocked my phone, trying to send an SOS message to Ryan. But before I could type, Ethan suddenly pinned me in place. His long arm reached in, and without hesitation, he snatched the phone from my grip. I lunged forward to grab it back. Ethan, what the hell are you doing? He ignored me, restraining my other wrist effortlessly as he rolled down the window. Then, right in front of my despairing eyes, he tossed my phone out. After completing the act, he pulled me tightly into his embrace and pressed a kiss to the top of my head. Sophie, you're so disobedient. His voice was eerily gentle. This is my fault. I should never have let you leave my side. But don't worry. It won't happen again. From now on, we'll be together forever. Okay. No. Let me go. I struggled with all my strength and slapped him across the face. But instead of getting angry, he only held me even tighter. His expression was a mix of madness and obsession. Sophie, stop lying to yourself. You love me. The only reason you're with Ryan is to make me jealous. His tone grew increasingly deranged. You're trying to punish me, aren't you? Punish me for pretending not to know your feelings all this time. But I know now. Sophie, I was wrong. I'm not your brother. Let's start over. Sophie, please. Ethan Carter had completely lost his mind. Ethan, I said, my voice cold and unwavering. I have never liked you. His eyes darkened. That's impossible. You're lying. During the time I was locked in the psychiatric hospital, I had spent every single day reflecting on my feelings for him. I had been jealous whenever I saw him with other women. I had gone to great lengths to drive them away. I had always followed his every move, greedily hoping he would never look at anyone else. But none of that had been real. It was never love. It was the result of his manipulation. Ethan had indulged my reckless behavior for years, feeding me just enough kindness to keep me attached. Every time I started to doubt my feelings, he would cross boundaries that no brother should. Yet he never fully admitted nor denied his actions. This had been his game all along. From the very beginning, it was Ethan who had harbored feelings beyond sibling affection. He had refused to acknowledge them, tormented by his own possessiveness, and instead blamed everything on me. Ethan Carter was nothing but a coward. How could I ever love someone like him? I shoved him away with all my strength. My voice was sharp and merciless as I tore apart his deepest, most shameful secret. Ethan Carter, you fell in love with your foster sister. That's disgusting. For a long time, I had been waiting for this moment, to throw these words back at him, exactly as he had once said to me. His entire body stiffened, his face twisted into something dark and unreadable. Then, with sudden force, he grabbed my clothes and tore them apart. Cold air swept over my bare shoulder. A monster awakened before my eyes. His fingers tightened around my neck, pressing down inch by inch. Yes, I love you, he admitted, his voice raw and filled with madness. Every second you spend with that bastard, I want to rip you away from him. You will never escape me. Just like in my past life, he wanted to imprison me once again. But I would never let that happen. A sharp pain bloomed on my lips as he crushed them in a violent kiss. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. I reached into my pocket, fingers wrapping around the small switchblade I had hidden there. Then, with all the strength I could muster, I plunged it into his chest. Ethan let out a muffled grunt but didn't let go. Instead, his grip on my wrist tightened, and he slowly twisted the knife's handle with a smirk. Does that make you feel better? He's a lunatic. I should have expected this. Ethan Carter was utterly insane. Suddenly, the car swerved sharply. The screech of tires and the force of the sudden brake nearly shattered my eardrums. The momentum sent me crashing forward. But before I could hit anything, Ethan pulled me into his arms. A groan of pain slipped past his lips, likely from his fresh wound being torn open. Then, he snapped at the driver. Are you trying to get yourself killed? The driver stammered. Young master, there's a car blocking us, forcing us to stop. A black Maybach. Ryan. The vehicle in front was driving aggressively, pushing forward at breakneck speed, barely leaving enough space to avoid a collision. He's reckless. But Ethan was even crazier. Ram into him. Let's see if he's really ready to die. Ethan underestimated the human survival instinct. The driver wasn't foolish enough to risk his life for his employer. Just as the two cars were about to collide, he slammed on the brakes, jerking the steering wheel and crashing into the side of the median instead. The Maybach came to an immediate halt. Ryan's eyes burned with fury as he stormed over. He wrenched open the car door and scanned me from head to toe, his hands trembling slightly as he confirmed I was unharmed. Only then did he exhale sharply, releasing the breath he had been holding. He carefully pulled me out of the car, draping his coat over my shoulders. Stay here and wait for me. Then, without another word, he dragged Ethan out of the vehicle. He clenched his fists and swung, one brutal punch after another. Ryan didn't say a single word. All his fury, all his pain, was poured into every single hit. Ethan had already been injured from the knife wound, and when the car crashed, he had instinctively shielded me, crushing his leg under the impact. Now, with Ryan mercilessly beating him, he couldn't even make a sound of pain. He's going to die. If Ethan dies, Ryan won't be able to walk away from this. I rushed forward, grabbing Ryan's fist, wrapping my fingers tightly around his knuckles. Ryan, we still have to go home. My voice was soft, but it was enough. His entire body tensed, his breathing uneven. But finally, he stopped. The driver was still alive. Ethan was still alive. And Ryan was here. With me. The first thing Ryan did was call an ambulance and have the unconscious Ethan Carter sent to the hospital. What happened afterward was handled by my adoptive mother. After Ethan woke up, she immediately had him sent away, citing mental instability and the need for treatment. As for where he was taken, I had no idea. And frankly, I had no interest in knowing. While Ethan was still unconscious, I secretly backed up the recording I had made in the car and sent a copy to my adoptive mother. As soon as she received it, she reached out to negotiate with me. If that recording were to be exposed, Ethan's crimes would be undeniable. Moreover, the scandal of a wealthy heir being obsessed with his foster sister was hardly good for the family's reputation. Ethan himself might not have cared, but his parents had spent their whole lives building their legacy. They wouldn't stand by and watch everything crumble. Of course, Ryan also played a hand in this. He had gathered solid evidence of Ethan's crimes and delivered it directly to Ethan's adoptive father. How they chose to handle it was up to them. 3 months after Ethan was secretly sent away, a scandal erupted. The Yates Corporation was betrayed by one of its own. Their financial chain was severed, plunging the company into a severe economic crisis. Facing imminent bankruptcy, they were forced to accept an acquisition. And the buyer? A man with the last name Lewis. Our 2 little pets had stuffed themselves full and were now curled up in their beds, napping peacefully. I snuggled against Ryan, lazily reaching out to poke his side. Ryan, when did you start gathering evidence? He ignored me, still upset. He was angry that I had knowingly put myself in danger, choosing to confront Ethan alone. That day, I had seen Ethan's car parked nearby and had deliberately sent Ryan away. Don't be mad. Okay, I coaxed, clinging to him with an apologetic smile. If I had told you in advance, you wouldn't have let me go. His expression darkened. Did you even think about how I felt? A sulking husband was the hardest to appease. I wrapped my arms around his neck, shamelessly acting spoiled. Of course. I thought about you. And what exactly were you thinking? I was wondering what delicious meal my husband would cook for me tonight. Ryan nearly lost it. He tightened his grip around my waist, resting his head against my shoulder. His cool breath brushed against my skin as he held me tighter, his arms trembling slightly. It hurt, he choked out. Do you know how scared I was? His entire body shuddered. What if I had never found you? What if you had disappeared forever? His voice cracked, raw with emotion. Sophie Carter, why do you always leave me behind? I never planned to leave him. If Ethan hadn't let me go, that recording would have gone public immediately, dragging the entire Yates family down with him. It's my fault, I admitted, stroking his fluffy hair. But I had a plan. I even brought a weapon. Ryan's grip on me tightened. His voice was hoarse. And if he had hidden you away again? What if I couldn't find you? I smiled softly. You big idiot. If you keep crying, I'm going to have to kiss you. Ryan lifted his head from my shoulder. His red-rimmed eyes made him look like a fragile little rabbit, one that was begging to be teased. Liar, he muttered. I'm not a liar, I whispered. Then I leaned in and kissed him. Extra Ryan's POV. I had always loved Sophie Carter. Everyone laughed at me, calling me the bastard child. I had no family, no friends. The Lewis family's servants made my life miserable, tormenting me behind closed doors. Only Sophie noticed me. When she was 5 years old, she stuffed a bag of animal-shaped biscuits into my arms. Before that, I had never tasted a cookie. Whenever I got too hungry, I would sneak into the kitchen and steal leftover scraps. The biscuits smelled amazing. Even though my stomach was growling, I couldn't bring myself to eat them right away. Sophie stood before me, hands on her hips, ordering me in her tiny voice. "Ryan Lewis, eat the damn cookies. I'll kiss you." Liar. He was absolutely a liar. I never ate the cookies, and Sophie Carter never kissed me. Later, she changed her words again. "If you eat the cookies like a good boy, I'll kiss you." Still a liar. Sophie was different from me. Even though she was an adopted daughter, she had a family that loved her, foster parents who cared for her, and an older brother who spoiled her. In the Yates family, she could do whatever she wanted because, no matter what happened, Ethan Carter would always clean up the mess for her. On the night of her 18th birthday, she looked at Ethan from afar, her eyes sparkling like stars. She told me, "I like Ethan, and he likes me too." A dull, suffocating pain spread in my chest. I thought as long as she was happy, it was enough. But then, one day, she was gone. I searched everywhere, but I couldn't find her. My world turned gray. I confronted Ethan, demanding answers, but he only dodged the question, never giving me a straight answer. Then, not long after, news of Sophie's death reached me. I had lost her forever. If only I had been braver back then. I locked myself inside the apartment she had once lived in. Every corner still carried traces of her presence. Sometimes, I could almost see her standing right beside me. I swore to myself, over and over, that if I ever got another chance, I would protect her with everything I had. And somehow, I was lucky enough to be reborn, back to the year I turned 18. This time, I fought my way up in the Lewis family, using every method possible to carve out a position for myself. One day, I would make every last person in the Yates family pay for what they had done. Dealing with them wasn't difficult. After all, in my past life, I had spent 3 whole years dismantling them piece by piece. By the time I died, none of them had met a good ending. This life would be no different. But Sophie still saw me as the timid, insecure person I had once been. He still enjoyed the sense of accomplishment that came with protecting me. So I let him. As long as it made him happy. There were times when I could barely keep up the act. But luckily, he never noticed. That day in the hospital, when Sophie reached out to me, I couldn't hold back any longer. I wrapped my arms around him tightly. And then, he called me husband. Hold me. In my heart, I whispered back, "I missed you so much."